At the Valdai Discussion Club's 22nd gathering, the speaker set aside any notion of offering a manual for world affairs and instead mapped out a worldview shaped by uncertainty, shifting power centres, and a call for what he described as a renaissance in diplomacy. The forum, he said, remains valuable precisely because it allows participants to step outside the agenda imposed by the global information space, to scan the horizon and half open the veil that conceals the day of tomorrow. He framed the moment as one of profound transition. In his telling, multipolarity is not just a trend, it is the defining structure within which states now operate. The new order brings wider space for action, faster surprises, and many more participants, cultural and civilizational differences included, who expect their interests to be weighed, not dictated to. Against that backdrop, he warned that the obligation of leaders has grown heavier and outcomes less predictable. Vladimir Putin: "We're living at a juncture with rapid and profound changes." From that premise followed his note of vigilance. Vladimir Putin: "We should be ready for anything." In the same breath, he underscored the stakes. Vladimir Putin: "The stakes are extremely high. This turbulence," he argued, "is not accidental. It is the paradoxical outcome of efforts to impose a single hierarchy with the West at the pinnacle. Vladimir Putin: multipolarity has become the direct effect of attempts to impose and maintain the global hegemony." That attempt, he insisted, was always going to fail, history's answer to hubris. He revisited the post-Cold War moment when, in his account, Russia signalled a willingness to dissolve blocs and work towards shared security, even floating the idea of joining NATO, first in 1954, then again during President Bill Clinton's 2000 visit to Moscow. He told the story with two Clinton quotes to illustrate how the idea flickered and died in a day. Vladimir Putin, quoting Bill Clinton: "Oh, you know, it's very interesting. I think it's possible." Hours later, he said, came the reversal. Vladimir Putin, quoting Bill Clinton: I sought the advice of my team. It's unfeasible. From that point onward," he said, "Washington and its allies succumbed to the temptation of absolute power without the historical perspective or intellectual discipline to resist it. The world," he continued, "cannot be run by a single force, prescribing what should be done to everybody, how everyone should breathe." The so-called liberal order may have been convenient for those lower down the food chain, he conceded, because it came with a ready-made set of rules and fewer responsibilities. But it left genuine problems unsolved, encouraged posturing, and normalised a politics of prohibition and manipulation that, he argued, has re-emerged in Europe today. He concluded that no power is limitless. Overreach erodes internal stability and prompts citizens to ask basic questions about costs and purpose. Europe, in his view, is wrestling with that backlash. He cited discontent, street protests, cultural crises, debt burdens and social strains. Yet its leaders, he said, keep stoking up the enemy image and insisting Russia plans to attack. He called the claim absurd, a case of either incompetence or cynical persuasion. Vladimir Putin: "No, you should not provoke us. Never ever did it end badly for the provocators, and no exceptions will happen in future." He pressed the point that Russia doesn't initiate military standoffs. It responds to threats to sovereignty swiftly and convincingly. The heart of his security doctrine, long held, he said, rests on indivisibility. Vladimir Putin: "I said on many occasions that security of some countries cannot be at the expense of others. In this case, there will be no security for anyone." That principle, he argued, was pushed aside in the euphoria of the Cold War's end, giving rise to conflicts across the late 20th and early 21st centuries, including Ukraine. The reasons for Ukraine's tragedy are well known, he maintained, and he did not rehearse them again. Instead, he returned to his critique of Western policy. In his telling, Ukraine was armed and steered against Russia, while nationalism and neo-Nazism were fostered. The country became a tool in a bigger geopolitical game. He even invoked a counterfactual from US politics, Vladimir Putin. He said that had he been in power, that could have been avoided. And I agree with that statement. The line referred to Donald Trump and the notion that different policy choices might have averted war. He widened the lens to stress that a new global majority, states determined to pursue their own balanced development, refuses to take sides and instead seeks practical, non-hierarchical cooperation. He thanked partners ranging from China, India, Brazil, and South Africa to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, Iran, and others in Europe, Africa, and Latin America for attempting to mediate and encourage de-escalation. So far, he said, those efforts have not stopped fighting. He blamed a determined minority in Europe for fueling escalation, but predicted that goodwill shall prevail. On sanctions and isolation, he presented Russia as both resilient and necessary to global balance. Vladimir Putin, Russia has demonstrated the highest degree of resilience and ability to withstand intensive global pressure that would ruin an entire country. He added that the wider system itself would not let Russia go because any sustainable equilibrium, economic, strategic, cultural, logistical, requires Russia's participation. The campaign to impose a strategic defeat, he said, ignores that reality and refuses to adapt. His message, the most stubborn will eventually be taught by events, not lectures. Looking ahead, he said the complexity of a polycentric world requires non-linear creative diplomacy, more akin to quantum mechanics than to classical cause and effect. This is why he predicts a revival of high diplomatic art, where the measure of statecraft is the ability to build workable coalitions with neighbours, partners, and even opponents. Institutions that reflect this ethos, BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and a proliferation of regional groupings are flourishing, he said, precisely because they reject hierarchy. They are not against anyone, but for their own interests. The speaker then turned to Europe's militarization and rhetoric, which he said Moscow is monitoring closely. If others wish to measure themselves against Russia militarily, he said, they are free to try. Russia has proved its capacity to respond promptly when its sovereignty is threatened. This is not bravado, he insisted, but historical pattern. Weakness invites coercion, decisiveness deters it. Those cherishing the dream of defeating Russia strategically should understand the cost. He stressed that national security now encompasses far more than armies and weapons. Climate, technology, demographics, and information systems are all part of an indivisible whole with their own unpredictable rhythms and cross-currents. The challenge, therefore, is systemic and cannot be met with ideology or condescension. Solutions must be built through joint incremental work. No civilization holds the master key on its own. The task, in his words, is to return to classic diplomacy based on respect and mutual understanding, not coercion. Western diplomacy of monologue, he said, turned conflicts into humanitarian catastrophes by pushing narrow interests and dismissing local history and identity. He cited the Middle East and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as examples where unilateral scripts have failed. He also reaffirmed his view of the United Nations as indispensable, if imperfect. Calls to scrap or sideline the UN miss its unique legitimacy, he argued. The real question is how states choose to use it. As membership has quadrupled since 1945, the UN has organically become more diverse and, in a sense, multipolar even before the world did. Governance should reflect that reality. Reforms, if pursued, must preserve the core idea of the institution born from victory over fascism and designed to solve problems across cultures and political traditions. Values and traditions, he added, are a vital compass in an era of unpredictable shocks. Civilizations are special entities shaped by culture, history, ethics, religion, geography, and environment. Respecting them is the condition for cooperation. Attempts to force a universal model, whether by the Soviet Union in its day or by the United States and Europe more recently, produce brittle outcomes. What lasts, he argued, grows from a society's own groundwork. In this spirit, he offered a maxim about Russia's approach to others. Vladimir Putin. We in Russia were never known for such racist approach to other countries, nations, cultures. It has never been our course and it will never be our course. He paired that with a broader political judgment about our era. Vladimir Putin, times where the narrow group of the most powerful nations decided for the whole world on how to leave is irretrievably gone. He closed with a portrait of Russia as a state forged in hardship and persistence, not exceptional, but uniquely tempered by history. The country's role will evolve, he said, but its utility to global equilibrium will not. Vladimir Putin, it has existed. It continues to exist and will exist. Harmony and balance in a multipolar world, he concluded, can only be achieved through shared effort. And Russia, he pledged, is prepared to do its part. Finally, he returned to first principles as a parting note. Security must be indivisible, diplomacy must be respectful, and institutions must be adapted, not discarded, to reflect a broader, more democratic international community. The era of bloc politics and imposed hierarchies, he said, has reached its limits. The alternative is harder, building non-linear, multilateral arrangements that reconcile interests without denying differences. In his view, the world is already headed that way, with or without those who feel nostalgia for colonial times. The work ahead is patient, creative, and collective. And for that work, he said, Russia is ready. Vladimir Putin, this is a time-tested history, tested fact.